Hello, and welcome to Social Studies Teachers Have Issues. I'm Dr. Heather Ballinger.
And I'm Dr. Kyle Ward.
The main objective for this webcast series is to try and help social studies teachers who are stretched too thin, both financially and with the amount of time they can put into prepping for their classes. This lack of time and money often hurts teachers when it comes to vetting some of the better teaching resources that are already out there.
To do this, we are interviewing education experts from a series of museums, libraries, and institutions. Interesting enough, many of these organizations suffer from the same issue of not having enough time or money to reach out to teachers across the country, and often have to rely on social studies teachers stumbling across their website or one of their professional development opportunities to learn about what resources they actually have.
With that in mind, the issue we're going to deal with today is how to teach about colonial America. In order to learn more about this subject and how to teach about it, we will be interviewing Isabel Mann, the program manager from Colonial Williamsburg. Welcome, Isabel. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here. Isabel, one of the questions we kind of ask everybody is, if you get a job like you have, the assumption is that somewhere along the line you were interested in education or history. Did this happen when you were young? Did you go to college and get inspired? Something after you started your career? Where does the fire ignite for you?
Yeah, I've been a lifelong history lover and something that my dad and I really bonded over when I was a kid growing up because he's a real history nerd. And so when I got to college, I knew right away that I wanted to be a history major. And I thought for a long time that I wanted to be a history professor in higher education. And so I pursued my BA and then my MA in history. And when I got to graduate school, I realized that was not for me. A lot of time spent scrolling through microfilm, a lot of time by myself. And I kind of realized I needed to be in something that was more people focused. So when it was time for me to graduate, I decided I wanted to explore teaching. So I did Teach for America. And so I was Miss Mann teaching in Manning, South Carolina at Manning Junior High Alternative School. Tried real hard to get my middle school students to call me the man. They did not comply. Did not think I was cool enough to be called the man. And, like most people, I had a really rough first year of teaching, but I did fall in love with it and fall in love with K through 12 education, and pretty quickly pivoted to museum education, and have found, the sort of niche of supporting teachers. I have that experience of working at a very under-resourced school. I think the first week of my teaching experience, my students did not have desks. We were in an old conference room. So teaching seventh and eighth graders at a conference table definitely provides challenges for classroom management. And so I really understand that experience, and I feel very passionate and lucky to have kind of found a career within museum education where I can kind of bring the best that museums have to offer, to help teachers and what they do.
What colleges did you attend?
I went to the University of Georgia, and I did a double degree program. So I actually got my bachelor's and master's at the same time. Not sure I would recommend it. But that's what I did. It was very difficult.
So you graduate from there and then you take a job at Colonial Williamsburg. Is that the next step?
So I did Teach for America. So I was in South Carolina, and decided I wanted to move back to Atlanta, and got a job at Kennesaw State University right outside of Atlanta that has a museum of Holocaust history on campus. And so I, was kind of able to very quickly pivot into museum education. And I loved working at a university museum. We did a lot of student-facing programs. So I did a lot of field trips on campus. But then my favorite part of the job was going across the state of Georgia and doing in-school programs. So I would, go to a middle school and I would take that teacher's full day of classes, and teach on special topic lessons about the Holocaust and World War II. I did that for about 3 years before I transitioned into a more teacher-facing role. So I was the teacher program specialist at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. And then that's sort of how I got the opportunity to do teacher programming on a much larger scale at Colonial Williamsburg. And I started at CW about 2 years ago.
Quite the journey, quite the path to get there.
Yeah, I've moved around a lot. Um,
And you've got certifiable Southern roots then too. You seem like you hit major portions of the South.
yeah, it's interesting. My dad, when I moved to Virginia, like prepped me. He was like, "You're going to the North." He was like, "It's very different culturally." I was like, "I'm pretty sure Virginia is still the South, Dad." Richmond was the capital of the Confederacy.
Oh, that's fun. So now that you're at Colonial Williamsburg, what does your day-to-day work look like?
Yeah, one of the things I love about working at Colonial Williamsburg is no day is really the same. So I have, a lot of days that are kind of your typical office day where, I'm doing a lot of meetings, and a lot of prep for programs both in person and online for teachers and resource creation. But then we also do a lot of teacher programming on site. So those days are a lot more active and being out in the historic area at Colonial Williamsburg and taking teachers behind the scenes to talk with interpreters and tradespeople, going into the conservation labs. And so no 2 days really look alike. And even on my office days, I try to get out and walk in the historic area to kind of see what's going on and kind of stay connected to um, the interpreters and what we're doing.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have any big projects that you're working on or anything upcoming?
Yeah, so we have two things that have required a lot of preparation. So we are currently doing an online course about historical thinking skills for teachers. So that opened the first week of March, and so we're kind of in the maintenance phase now. But there was a lot of preparation thinking through how to design that course about cultivating historical thinking skills in the classroom, and also creating new activities and lesson plans based on objects and primary sources from Colonial Williamsburg's connections or collections, excuse me. And then, of course, we have our summer teacher program. So, prep for that kind of starts August, as soon as those summer programs wrap up, like 2 weeks later, we're already trying to start the prep for the next summer. We bring about 500 teachers from all 50 states every summer for week-long programs. So starting end of May through July, we have anywhere from 30 to 100 teachers on site for week-long programs, and they're fully funded. So there's a lot of content preparation that goes into that, but also just very complex logistics of making sure that teachers' travel is booked and their hotels are good. And so right now we're kind of in the thick of prepping for our summer teachers, which is really exciting.
That sounds fun.
Very cool. Isabel, I'm going to throw you a curveball here because this was brought up just the other day. So when I was talking, I teach pre-service teachers, and we were talking about the Cold War era. This is when this is, and this is the Civil Rights era and stuff like that. Colonial period. In your mind, or does Colonial Williamsburg have an official, like, this is the start and stop of the colonial period?
That's a great question. I think it really depends on who you ask. For us at the Teacher Institute, we really started, we're located in Virginia, right? So we really started with teachers in 1607 with Jamestown. That's sort of the scope of our interpretation of the colonial period. We start in 1607, and then we go through the American Revolution with teachers. But I think if you ask historians, they might have a very different answer. Like, are you talking about British colonial America? Are you talking about Spanish colonial America? Obviously, Spain had a foothold in North America much longer than we did, or the British did. And so I think that it really depends on how you're looking at it and how you're framing it. But for us, we start with Jamestown in 1607. And Virginians get very competitive with Massachusetts about who was here first.
I suppose a little back and forth with that. And yeah, those academic historians, they're the worst. And I'm hoping that my colleagues down the hall didn't hear all that.
Well,
Um,
I was
They're the
also
best. They're the best.
I'm also wondering, Isabel, about the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and if your organization's talking about that, or if you all are doing anything about that.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of all we talk about. It's sort of the pinnacle of our 5-year strategic plan was A250. So we're really gearing up for not just the summer and specifically July 4th, but we really have a slate of programming surrounding the 250th all year long. So it kind of started in January for us.
Yeah.
And our summer teacher programs are all about the 250th. So we've sort of designed a week-long program about the lead up to the Declaration of Independence and sort of the echoes across the revolution to today. So sort of the title of our summer program is Revolutionary Roots Teaching Civic Engagement at 250. And so really what lessons from that time period and from that revolutionary era are is still relevant today as we think about civic engagement and what it means to be a citizen today. Like a lot of those same debates and questions that they debated writing the Declaration of Independence and later the Constitution after the American Revolution are debates that we're still having. So what can we learn from that? And that's a really big theme of our summer programming, which I'm really excited.
We'll probably circle back to that and figure out some of the other things that you're doing here too. One question I had, much like you, Heather and I both started out as classroom teachers, but both did some middle school and stuff like that as well. But as you know, teaching U.S. history, there's just, so many things we got to cover. It's kind of a quick march through time. With that said, why, as a new teacher, should I spend time talking about the colonial period? I want to get to 20th century and 21st century here. What is it about the colonial period that's so important?
Yeah, I think, something that I struggled with as an early career teacher was how do you get through all of that content? But something that museum education has taught me, and I think is the biggest reason, like if I were to go back to the classroom now after being a museum educator for 6 or 7 years, I would be a much better teacher, as each content period like really provides an opportunity to teach historical thinking skills and that those skills are so relevant to how students navigate our world today. So many of those skills that students learn when they analyze primary sources are transferable to making sense of our world today, but also analyzing social media and figuring out valid information from invalid information and really learning how to ask deep questions about the information that's coming across their phones. And so I think for the colonial period, it provides a really good foundation for thinking through what is the process of doing history, what are the historical thinking skills of looking at a primary source, and how are those skills relevant to what students need to relate and navigate the world today. Something that's been really cool about working at Colonial Williamsburg is one of our historians focuses in on media history and print history. And so one of the first online programs I did at Colonial Williamsburg was with him. And we sort of looked at the news and media landscape of the colonial period. How did colonial Americans receive their information? And it's not dissimilar to how we receive our information today. During that time period, they didn't have sort of the journalistic profession that we have with standards and ethics. Printers really put it on the readers to determine fact from fiction. Like their role was to just print the information. They were not fact checking, they were not sorting through what was true, what was not true. And it was sort of the responsibility of citizens and readers of the newspapers to navigate that. And obviously, we're in a situation right now with social media where everyone has a platform, and companies like Meta, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, they're not really playing a role in fact checking our information that we're receiving. And so it's not, I mean, the technology is different, but it's not a dissimilar information landscape. And so we did an activity in that online program, and it's a lesson plan that's in our online course now of uh, Two Truths and a Lie, where they look through three really short newspapers from colonial America and they try to determine if it was fact or fiction. And then they're given another primary source to kind of reevaluate once they have new evidence that comes into the foreplay. And then the sort of ending of that is, okay, well, now let's think about social media and the information that you're receiving. You changed what you thought was the truth and the lie when you received new information outside of the newspaper, and sort of getting them to make that connection. That lateral reading is important for primary source analysis, but that's also a skill that's important for information on the internet, for social media, that you're not going to be able just in one social media post to be able to determine if it's fact or fiction. You have to go outside of that source to collect new information to decide if that source is valid or not. And so a historian might be upset with me that I'm not talking about sort of the colonial history and why that's so important. But for me, I feel like as someone who taught in the classroom as now as a museum educator and kind of work with teachers across the country, I feel like those skills are so important. And so you may only have 2 days to teach about colonial America or 2 days to teach about the American Revolution, but it's the skills that you start to build in those early units that will carry you through the Cold War, through 9/11, to get to those periods. And I think that the colonial period and the revolutionary period are sort of ripe with primary sources and just thinking through how people received their information and how that's different or the same from how we do that today, because we're all on our phones
Wow, I
24/7.
feel like we did not plant Isabel to say that, but that was exactly, I mean, verbatim what I tell my method students on the regular, which is, there's too much content. We have a tyranny of content with the standards, and you're never gonna, you can feel passionate about time periods and spend more time on them as teachers, but I love the idea of places like Colonial Williamsburg and people like you as program managers, Isabel, like really thinking about in curriculum development, thinking about how to help teachers teach historical thinking skills that they can apply. Because I always think about, like, or I always tell my students, like, what do you want your students to remember 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now after being in your classroom? And although we might not remember all the details of things that happened at Jamestown, we'll absolutely remember the historical thinking skills, or we would want our students, right, to be able to apply those historical thinking skills to what they're doing in their everyday lives. And I think that connection with critical literacy and civic participation is like, oof, I got goosebumps. That was so great. Where can I find resources like this on your website? And if I wanted to help my students through historical thinking skills?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, the Teacher Institute has a curriculum website called our Educator Resource Library. It is currently undergoing a revamp. So it's not online right now, so I can't screen share and show you, but a lot of the sort of new historical thinking skills, activities, and lesson plans that we're working on are going to be part of that revamp, and it will relaunch in September. So keep your eyes out for that. Another really exciting place to look for some of these resources is a project powered by Colonial Williamsburg called history.org. And so I will screen share to show you guys this because I think it's really exciting. So history.org is partnering with museums across the nation to kind of bring the best primary sources from museums across the nation, but also across time periods into one place. And so I know as a former teacher, like I didn't have textbooks when I taught. So I was going online, right? And there's so many different museums that offer primary sources and lessons, and it really takes so much time to kind of find the right primary sources for the time period that you're teaching. And so really the idea behind history.org is to put sort of the best that museums have to offer into one place that's easy to navigate for teachers. And then there's also sort of wraparound content that teachers can find as well. And so it launches officially on July 4th. So it's not fully open to the public yet. We're in beta, but it will open on July 4th. And eventually it will have resources for the full US history scope and sequence. And it has resources for kindergarten through 12th grade. So there are specific civics resources from elementary through high school. And then there's some content specific resources as well. In addition to primary sources for the full US history scope and sequence, there are also right now about 500 videos that are animated and designed with students in mind. So none of them are longer than 3 to 5 minutes. Some of the videos are very focused in on historical thinking skills. And then some are more focused on content like pivotal battles of the Revolutionary War. But we have a whole collection of skills and concepts. So this is really great for introducing students, especially younger students, to some of those historical thinking skills. I'm trying to find, yeah, we have social studies skills for maps. And then we have a lot of educational videos as well. So what is history? Who constructs history? How is history constructed? A lot of those things that you want to talk with your students about, just to introduce them to the process of doing history. These are really great videos for that. And every video and every artifact or primary source has wraparound content for teachers as well. So you'll see here, there's an about description, there's a transcript of the video, but it also comes with vocabulary support and comprehension questions. And so everything that's on there, every asset, whether it's a source or a video, has those wraparound content. And it can all be exported to your Google Classroom. So if there's a question that you don't like and you want to change it, or you only want to pick 3 questions from the 8 that we have listed, it's really easy to export it to your Google Classroom and to edit. And then it also comes with classroom slides that you can use for the video and the questions. And then there are teacher notes that go along with every asset as well. And so I think this is going to be a game changer for teachers. I know I spent a lot of time going onto lots of different museum sites. I spent a lot of time on Teachers Pay Teachers as an early career teacher, and it's so time consuming to find trusted, good sources. And so this is one way that we're trying to combine the best that museums have to offer into one easy place. So it's in beta right now, so there are some sources available to the public, so that you can go ahead and explore how history.org works. But it fully launches on July 4th this summer. And then after it launches, the plan is they have a 5-year plan where they're going to continue adding primary sources. So it's a site that will continue to grow in terms of the content that we have to offer. And it's not just colonial or revolutionary America, it's the full US history scope and sequence, which I think is really exciting as well. So Educator Resource Library will be coming in September, but we also have a much bigger curriculum website that's coming this summer on July 4th. That's also very exciting.
That's really cool. Is history, what's the organization that is funding history.org? Do you know?
It is Colonial Williamsburg, so it's powered by us. But sort of the framework is that it's partner organization. So because it's, outside of our content scope, we say powered by Colonial Williamsburg. But yeah, it's funded by CW and our very generous donors. And it's free and will remain free.
Great. That is great.
That's the phrase teachers are looking for. The free part is always great.
And that idea that you said about, when you're a new teacher or just a teacher looking for in an area where you're not really comfortable, you can just get lost. And I think that the way, things are funded on your search engine, it's usually like the sponsored ones end up showing up, and those are not necessarily the ones vetted by actual, historians. And there's a capitalist component to our searches. So I think having these, go to, 3 or 4 go-to websites that you check first. I mean, I can definitely see this becoming one of them. Thank you for showing that with us.
Yeah, and that does remind me something to note is that all of the partner organizations that are contributing do go through a application process. So these are partner organizations that are vetted. Every primary source, every video goes through a rigorous review process that includes historians and current classroom teachers. So lots of review, very strenuous vetting process for everything that's going on this site. So I think something, especially in recent years, that I think a lot of teachers are experiencing are questions from parents and from administrators about, are you teaching from valid sources? Why are you teaching this? Where are you pulling this information from? And so I think this also gives you a really strong foundation to point back and say, no, like this is coming from reputable organizations. This has been vetted by historians who are experts in their field. Gives you a place to kind of point back to that is reputable.
Absolutely. Yeah, great point.
Isabel, before I go to my next question here, listening to all the things you're talking about, I'm assuming you're not a one-woman show. Is there more people in the education? Like, how many people does Colonial Williamsburg, do you have a guesstimate for us? How many people you work with just on education?
Yeah, so I'm on a team specifically for teacher programming, so Teacher Institute. So there are 4 program managers. So I'm part of a team of 4. So I take the lead on online programs and help with our on-site programs. My colleague Andy Engel, who you know well, is another one of our managers, and he takes the lead on on-site programming. So he is truly in the weeds of figuring out the logistics for our summer programming. My newest colleague, Ken Wolf, is fabulous. He just transitioned out of the classroom in August, so 9 years teaching in Virginia and Florida, and he's focusing on the revamp of our educator resource library. And then our new manager of education and outreach is Lindsay Horner, so she really focuses on our outside programs, as well as sort of getting the word out about our programming and resources to teachers. And then we have a executive director of K through 12 programs. So that's sort of the Teacher Institute team. We're obviously part of a much bigger division that focuses on education. So our division also includes the, probably like close to 100 interpreters we have in the historic area who interpret the history on site, as well as our team of historians. And we just got a school groups team in January. So we now have like field trip facilitators in our building, which is really fun. So we work pretty closely with that new team as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, Heather, I thought I wanted to bring that up because if teachers listen to this, the stuff that they're seeing at Colonial Williamsburg has been vetted, gone through with classroom teachers, so that's fantastic. Isabel, kind of related to that, at the university, I not only teach pre-service teachers, but I also do teach some history classes. If we have a history major listening to this, or a teacher who's like, I kind of like this topic and I want to create my own lesson plans, is there a way I can do research on colonial America going from a distance, going to the Colonial Williamsburg website?
Yeah, so let me share my screen again.
Okay.
And so your best bet if you want to, um, there we go. If you want to do some research online, is going to our Rockefeller Library website. So we do have a research library on site called the Rockefeller Library. And so they have great resources, obviously, on site in the library, but they also have lots of resources online as well. So if you go to just Google Colonial Williamsburg Rockefeller Library, and their website will pop right up. You can go to online resources, and they have lots of great resources for teachers to look through. You can obviously search through their catalog like you would any library. And then we also have the digital collections of the Virginia Gazette. So if you're interested in incorporating newspapers as a primary source in your classroom, this is a really great place to look. Um, uh, and just like a great place to kind of introduce students to what newspapers looked like and how they worked during this time period. We also have research reports on various topics related to Colonial Williamsburg and the colonial era. And then we have some visual resources. So our Omega Collections has a lot of different primary sources available to search through as well. Research databases and all of that. And something that I'm just now thinking through is that we also have library services. So we do have reference librarians on staff whose job it is to field research requests. So let's see. Microphone readers. If you email Rockefeller Library, they can help you with any sort of research requests that you might have. And our reference librarians are great and are very used to kind of fielding research requests from all sorts of people from across the country. So that's a great resource. And then something else that I'm just now thinking about is we are launching a partnership with Google Arts and Culture. And so by the end of the summer, we'll have 40 more Google Arts and Culture projects published. But I think we have about 12 now. And so a lot of our like most interesting primary sources are included in these Google Arts and Culture projects. Some of them are virtual tours of our buildings. Some of them are stories about persons of the past. So we have a really interesting arts and culture project about Patrick Henry, if I can find it. That's really interesting. So you can kind of hear from him. Virtual tours of our buildings. So Raleigh Tavern, Colonial Taverns are a great place to kind of talk about civic discourse and all of that as well. But they've really done a lot of great work about incorporating some of our like most interesting and engaging primary sources through these as well.
I'm not familiar with Google Arts and Culture. Could you just explain to me what that is?
Yeah, so it is a website sort of run by Google. And so they partner with history and art institutions from across the nation to kind of bring the best of those museums online virtually. So they do a lot of virtual tours of physical spaces, but they also have what they call stories, where they kind of piece together a story of a person or an event that institution interprets, and they incorporate like primary sources from that institution's collections. And so I've worked with teachers who have used this in their classroom. So it's great. You can do like an online scavenger hunt with students with a Google Arts and Culture project. Have them kind of figure out what primary sources they like from a story or a virtual tour as well. So if you have access to Chromebooks or devices with your students, this is a great way to do that. And Colonial Williamsburg is not the only institution that does that. I'm pretty sure like the Met has a Google Arts and Culture page and all of that.
That's really cool.
As well. Yeah, I wish I could find, I know that the Patrick
And
Henry.
Heather, thanks for asking that. I wasn't familiar with it either. And something that Heather and I've kind of discovered, I think we're both been impressed with, is some of these interpreters and some of these people who get into costume, and boy, do they really know their
Oh,
stuff.
they're so fun.
And Isabel, real quickly too, if I'm a college student, do you know, are there internships that I could possibly come out to Colonial Williamsburg and spend a semester or a summer or something like that?
Yeah, so Colonial Williamsburg does offer internships across the foundation. So depending on what you're interested in, you can intern with archaeology, you can intern with our collections. Teacher Institute has internships that we offer every summer. So if you're interested in um, sort of the education side of the museum world, or, we often get a lot of interns interested in interning with us who are education students and interested in teaching. And so this is like a really great way to kind of experience a cool professional development program with teachers from across the nation. We have found that a lot of our teacher participants like fight over, trying to get our interns to teach at their schools. And so, yeah, it's just a very cool experience, but you help us with the logistics side of teacher programming, but also with some of the facilitation of the lesson highlights and tours and different things like that. So you kind of get a very well-rounded experience.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, we had a couple teachers all the way up from Northern California come and do your Teacher Institute last summer, and they spoke very highly of it, and they had a great time. And I've been in their classroom a couple times, and they've incorporated some of the historical thinking skills and history that they learned. So they really benefited from it, and yeah, great programming. On the topic of that, we're like, as we're sort of getting closer towards the end, I'm thinking about if you have any books or documentaries or films that you suggest to teachers to help them better understand the colonial period or even what colonial Williamsburg is, either one. But I'm thinking mostly like if I'm a teacher and I'm teaching early America, and I don't even know where to start. Do you have any favorite books or films that you would recommend?
Yeah. So one of my colleagues recommended this book to me when I around the time that I first started here. It's called The Common Cause by Robert Parkinson. And so he kind of looks at the American Revolution period through the perspective of race. And so really looking at how misinformation and propaganda about enslaved interactions really kind of motivated some patriots in southern states to fight for their independence and sort of the role that that played. And I really like that because it really looks at sort of like the role of propaganda and misinformation in the American Revolution in a way that I had never thought about. Obviously, we've seen Join or Die, we teach about the Boston Massacre. But I don't often think about like Crispus Attucks and the Boston Massacre. Like that's not something that I taught when I taught about the Boston Massacre. And so I think it provides some like really cool primary sources that I don't think that like I would have thought about before, and just like a different lens to think about the lead up to the American Revolution and some of the factors that came into play. We in Williamsburg, we had like an almost Lexington and Concord in Virginia, called the Gunpowder Incident. And so the 250th anniversary of that was in 2025. And so we did a lot of programming around that. And we came up with a primary source activity around that as well. And something that kind of shocked me was like how much the sphere of an enslaved insurrection or the British freeing enslaved people like played a role in that. And so I think it's just like a very interesting thing to maybe think about incorporating when you teach about the lead up to the American Revolution. Because obviously race and slavery plays such a big role throughout US history. And so I think sometimes we forget that that was like a core part of the fabric in the lead up to the American Revolution. So I think that it just flips your perspective a little bit. And then some of the other books I've read recently are not really historical content, but more focused on pedagogy. But I recently read Make Just One Change about how to like help students ask better questions. And so that's something that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of the lead up to the summer. So we do walking tours of Colonial Williamsburg at the start of those week-long programs. And something that my boss kind of challenged me with is that walking tour is a lot of content. How could you flip that to be an inquiry-based tour? And so he recommended that book. So I read it, and I have gone on a lot of walking tours where it is a lot of content that I didn't think through. I would never teach like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's been a fun challenge to kind of think through viewing the tour, not as like a vehicle of just content, but also highlighting like good teaching. So that has been a really good read. And then another recent sort of pedagogy focused book that I've read is Why Learn History When It's Already on Your Phone by
That's a good
Sam
one.
Wineburg. And so that has gone into a lot of my thinking, into some of the resources that we've been creating. Like I'm a kind of a broken record about how I think primary source analysis builds skills for media literacy. And so that was a really good read for thinking through that. And I liked it so much that I scanned PDFs of chapters from that book, and it's in the online course we're running right now. So
That's great. I love this idea. I totally agree with you in that in a time period when we can access so much information and content, we really need to become good filters. And I think helping our students ask the right questions is like an essential component of being a good history teacher. So I love to hear that organizations, in addition to teachers, are trying to model that type of analysis and thinking. And I think that's going to be the future of teaching, not just history, but the future of teaching when we have access to so much just critical information, but how to filter that and how to question it and analyze it, I think is definitely one of those 21st century skills that we're going to develop in our students. So that is great to hear. Thank you for sharing those things with us.
A quick follow-up to that too, and we're kind of about ready to wrap up here as well, but your summer professional development, your institute, the Teachers Institute, can you give us a real quick rundown? Like if I'm a teacher and I apply, what am I going to be doing while I'm out in Colonial Williamsburg for about a week?
yes, yeah. So we run week-long programs pretty much every week of the summer. So you would arrive on a Sunday and leave on a Friday. So it's almost a week, about 5 full days. Um, and so you arrive on Sunday and you kind of get kicked off with a welcome dinner. You get to introduce your facilitator for the week. We also have um, master teachers who are embedded within every group. So you kind of have someone who's been through the program once or maybe multiple times, current classroom teacher to kind of help you make those connections from content to classroom. And then every day is really kind of looking through the process of doing history and historical thinking. So the first day will be offsite field trips, actually. So we'll start with a field trip to Yorktown. So this summer, we're starting at the end or the beginning, depending on how you view it. So kind of going back in time. So looking at the end of the American Revolution, the implications of that. And then that afternoon, you go from Yorktown to Jamestown, all the way back to 1607. And then we kind of open up a lot of questions that we then dive into throughout the rest of the week. So the rest of the week is a lot of time in Williamsburg, a lot of time in our historic area. You'll get experiences with our first person interpreters. And one of the coolest things that I think that we do is, if you visit Colonial Williamsburg and you see a performance by Thomas Jefferson or Patrick Henry, you'll only see them in character and you'll only be able to ask them questions in character. But for our teachers, they get to hear from Thomas Jefferson for 20 or 30 minutes, ask TJ questions, and then Thomas Jefferson will come out of character as himself, Kurt Smith, and teachers can kind of ask Kurt questions about how do you know what you know about Thomas Jefferson and some of the more hard-hitting questions. And so I think some of the most powerful moments that I've seen with that is, teachers will ask TJ or Thomas Jefferson questions about owning slaves, and Kurt will come out of character to answer that question with teachers, which I think can be really powerful. Outside of, our first person interpreters, you get a lot of behind the scenes experiences. So this summer, every single group will go behind the scenes in our conservation lab. So you'll get to see how we preserve paintings and textiles, how we restore buildings, kind of doing that again, that deep dive into how we do history at Colonial Williamsburg. And then we do a lot of classroom application sessions. So looking at primary sources that we've maybe seen throughout the day in the historic area, and thinking through how do you then take this and apply it into the classroom with your students. I'm sure I'm forgetting different components as well. This summer we are doing the taverns, which I think I'm very excited about, like looking at the role that taverns played and disseminating information and civic discourse. And we're doing, so the fact checking lesson that I talked about earlier, we're doing that lesson in Raleigh Tavern with teachers, which I think will be really cool.
Sounds like a busy week, that's for sure.
Yes, yeah.
Um,
And it's Virginia in the summer, so it is hot.
That's what I was going to say. The teachers who did it last year spoke very highly of it, but I got many a selfie with their faces just pretty much melting. So I'm sure you took really good care of them, but up north we don't get weather like that. So we,
No, it's very humid. We're basically in between two rivers and we're in a swamp. I moved here from New Orleans, and so it's better. The summers here are better and shorter than the summers in New Orleans, which last 6 months.
I love it.
So before I come to my final question, first of all, thanks for ruining all my future classes because I will be referring to Thomas Jefferson as TJ from now on. I like that personal connection there too. And this, I got to give a quick shout out since I think Andy and I talked. Goes back to 2010, the first time I sent a pre-service teacher out there. Heather, like you know from the teachers you talked to as well, this really is transformational. These my students come back and are just super excited. They can't imagine how many things they've learned. I wish I could go through all the stories that they've shared with me over the years. So anybody who's listening to this, please take the time to look into this one of these summer institutes. And now I'm going to ask one more loaded question, Isabel. This is probably could take up to 5 or 6 hours, but if you can keep it down just a few minutes here. But having worked where you work, is there an artifact, a document? Is there something at the museum that's like your favorite thing, your go-to that you always talk about?
Yeah, so Kyle, as you probably know, we restored the Bray School building last year. I mean, it was a multi-year project, but they opened the Bray School last year. And so it was the first school for Black children enslaved and free in North America. It obviously has a very complicated narrative. It was founded by the Bray Associates, who had a very religious motivation behind it. So really, teaching free and enslaved Black children about Christianity, but specifically to make them quote unquote better enslaved children for their enslavers. And there's just like a lot of complicated stories and narratives that come out of that you're educating children to be obedient. But in that process, you can't control what these children do with that education. And so we do know we're constantly doing research about students at the Bray School. And we know a lot of them went on to resist and to self-liberate, or at least to try to self-liberate. And so there's kind of two actually artifacts I want to talk about associated with that. So one is a runaway ad or self-liberation ad for Isaac B. He was not successful in his attempts to self-liberate, but there is a runaway ad talking about him where it says he feels entitled to his freedom, to be a free man. And I think there's something really that says a lot about the Bray School had specific motivations for educating these children, but they have agency and they did something else with that education. And I think that there's something really powerful in that. And then another an artifact that was found through the Bray School excavation was a slate and slate pencils. And it really surprises me, or has surprised me, how much debate there is about what the slate and slate pencils tell us about the Bray School and the students, because we have pretty much no documentation about what the Brave School students were taught. But we do have some artifacts that even like for the slates, like we don't necessarily know that the slates are from the Bray School. We think probably they're from that time period, but there's a lot of debate from amongst historians and the descendant community about whether or not the slates mean that the students were taught to write. We know that they were taught to read, but during that time period, writing was taught as a separate subject. So a lot of people were taught to read who weren't taught to write. And so there's just so much debate about, do we know? We can't say that we know for sure that they were taught to write. Does this mean that they were taught to write? Was it used for arithmetic? Is it something that actually isn't even connected to the Bray School? Like there are so many questions surrounding this artifact that we just don't know the answers to. And I think there's something really interesting about that, I think so much of history in K through 12 is taught as memorization of dates and facts. And obviously there are things that we know for sure about history, and there's lots of things that we know for sure about history. But isn't it so much more interesting and engaging when we get into the areas of history where we don't know, that we're still figuring it out? And I think we're in a culture right now where people are very sure about everything. They're very strong about their opinions. It's not okay to change your minds. And I just think there's something really interesting about, okay, we found this slate and we found these pencils. We don't actually know what it tells us about the Bray School and about these kids' experiences. We have some educated guesses, but we actually don't have enough evidence to say. And I think that there's something like so beautiful about that in today's world where people are so sure about everything and we're kind of stuck in these social media bubbles and so rarely are okay admitting uncertainty and that we have more questions than answers. But I think the best historians that I've met and worked with are the people who are the most comfortable sitting in uncertainty and asking questions and not knowing, but wanting to learn more. And I think that artifact can really help us like teach that to students and cultivate that sort of curiosity to tell them like, it's okay to not know and it's okay to change your opinion. Like that's life. And so, yeah, people don't like that artifact because there's like so much debate and arguments over it, but I love it. I think there's something really cool about it. So
That's great. Thank you for bringing that up.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. Isabel, if teachers are interested in learning more, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, so they can email me. My email is imann, MANN, at cwf.org. Or if they just want to keep up with what the Teacher Institute is doing, we have a Facebook page, Colonial Williamsburg Education. So feel free to follow us on Facebook. We have a Teacher Institute newsletter that we send out monthly called the Teacher Gazette. So if you go to our website and just look up Teacher Institute newsletter, you can subscribe there. My colleague Lindsay runs that in there. It's great. It's a great newsletter. So I feel like those are your best bets for kind of keeping up with Teacher Institute.
So thank you for tuning in to Social Studies Teachers Have Issues, and we hope to see you next time. We hope today's episode sparked new ideas and gave you practical tools to bring history and civics to life in your classroom. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe, share with your fellow educators, and connect with us online for more resources and upcoming episodes. Together, we're building a stronger community of teachers and shaping the future of education one resource at a time. Until next time, keep teaching boldly and stay curious.